Hi there, welcome to another edition of Ask Lex. I'm Karen Moloney, founder and MD of the Learning Experts, and today I'm having a chat with Keegan Luiters. Hi Keegan.
Hi Karen.
Now this conversation has come about from a chat that we were having around L&D being able to get some quick wins and find some low-hanging fruit where we can show some value to the business in different ways, shapes or forms, because sometimes the initiatives that we work on can take a while to get out into the business and it can take a while to show some ROI. When we talk about how can we help people do some things like, now, today, that are actually going to make a difference in the business, because I think when we can show that we are commercially aware and that we can help save the business money or improve efficiencies in different places, it's going to go some way towards us being seen as a trusted advisor in the business and somebody that helps solve problems. And we were just having a general chat about this, and then we went into something that Keegan was talking about with some clients recently, so maybe I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so I work with leaders and teams, and over a period of time, a lot of the conversations across organisations seem to be about how busy they were and how much time they were spending in meetings.
Okay.
And this consistent message that they had too many meetings, so their diary was full of meetings. The meetings that they had were too long, so they could have been shorter, and that not a lot was coming out of meetings.
Yeah,
And
I've been to many of those.
Yeah, and it feels like people go, yeah, that's like it's happening in a lot of different organisations, and for a whole bunch of reasons it's happening. But it's certainly, like to your point, is that something that learning professionals have an opportunity to tap into this, that is top of mind for people and is something that we can make a quick and tangible difference around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something that also, if we're thinking about it, it's a surface issue of how teams and organisations are performing, and there's it's a way in to be able to work with teams and show your benefit and build your internal brand around having that sort of trust, as you're saying, that trusted advisor relationship across the business.
Yeah, because meetings, actually, I don't think people understand the cost of meetings. I mean, and there's three things that we talked about in relation to cost of meetings, because I think if people are going to start talking about changing something, we have to identify where the problem is, and there are a few ways that we can do that, but you showed me a tool when we were talking to calculate like the hard cost of meetings. Maybe we want to share that.
Yeah, I'll share it now. I'll see if I can share my screen.
It was quite scary, actually, when I
looked
at it and thought of all the meetings I've been part of over the years and how much that's actually costing an organisation.
Yeah, people are often going, really? Is that really the case?
Yeah.
So can you see that now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll just pick a meeting. Let's say there's a meeting that's going for 1 hour and we've got 10 people. And I use those as round numbers so people can adjust. Okay, if I've got half that many people or I've got more people, it's easy to multiply it out. And the same deal with $100,000 per annum.
Right.
I'll just sort of say everyone is on $100,000 per annum in this meeting.
Yep. So you could put different salaries for different attendees.
Yeah. So if your team is more junior than that and their average cost is lower, or if they're more senior than that, their average cost is much higher, you can adjust that. But that's what 1 hour of a meeting for 10 people and $100,000 costs. That's for so if that's your weekly meeting, if that's a weekly meeting, that's what, a $35,000 per year investment in that.
Wow, that's actually quite a lot. And again, that's just a weekly meeting. And if you sort of add up then, thinking about all the different types of meetings that people are having, unproductive meetings, that's a big cost. That tool is actually something we'll put a link to, just if you're interested. I'll put a link at the underneath the video. But that's not the only cost, though, is it? I mean, because that's obviously the hard cost in terms of the time, that the company's paying people to attend. But there's other costs, aren't there?
Yeah, that's the sort of almost the easiest cost for people to be able to calculate, that one. And then there's another thing that I talked to them about. Well, in those hours that people are in meetings, what else could they do? So what's the opportunity cost? And in professional services firms, they're really acutely aware of this. And so because they know, well, we charge out at $500 or $600 an hour. So actually 10 people being in here at that amount is potentially $5,000 that we could otherwise be doing at that point. But for some other people, it's a bit harder. But the concept of what else could we be doing with this, and what would that cost us if we were using that time in another way? is another cost. And then the third cost is the least tangible, but probably the most significant, and that is the people cost. There's some research by a guy by the name of Steve Rogelberg, who does a lot of research into meetings. He's got a really interesting book that I can share a link to as well.
Okay.
And he found some research that correlated meeting satisfaction and job satisfaction. And often that feels pretty close to true. So people who are loving meetings probably love their job because the meetings are great, they're doing meaningful work, they're connected to the meetings, and they're getting really productive, valuable outcomes from the meetings. And people that hate their meeting culture in their organisations probably feel like they're not doing a lot of productive work, probably feel like they're not using their time well, and it becomes a real engagement issue. And then you can start connecting with that, and that's a huge cost in the organisation. That's
really interesting, actually, when I think about some of the organisations I've worked for as an employee and as a business owner, as a consultant. When I've gone into meetings, there was one in particular who they had a very a big culture around meetings. Meetings started on time. If you weren't there, you weren't there. Nobody was waiting until everybody was there to start the meeting. And there had to be an agenda, and there had to be outcomes, and there was always somebody actions, to take minutes for those meetings, etc. And I get that. Like when you come out of one of those things, you feel it's time well spent. You know what you're supposed to be doing. Everybody there had a purpose. Very, very different to some other places that I've worked where, people just, it's almost like a social chit chat.
Yeah. Has the meeting started? Are we?
I was like, oh, yes.
Yeah. And I think there's also, you do some research and reading around. There's some people suggesting you can cut all your meetings. You don't need to have any meetings, or you can just cut every meeting to, half an hour or 15 minutes or anything like that. And I think they are potentially blunt approaches to that. Some of the things that you were talking about there are exactly the fundamentals. And a lot of us know the fundamentals that we've got to do to have good meetings: have an agenda, start on time, finish on time, have outcomes, all those sorts of things. But we're still struggling to make that happen. And so it's really interesting around that element, that it's not, there's more to it than just knowing what to do, because otherwise we wouldn't be having.
Everyone would do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're understanding so that there's three elements of cost to a meeting then. So there's obviously the hard cost, there's the opportunity cost, and there's your people cost. And like you say, it does sound simple, in terms of, let's just change the way that we do meetings. But it's not that simple. It's not just as simple as saying, well, we're all going to, we're going to cut our meetings down to half an hour or.
Yeah, I think there's an element that is simple, and the thing is we want to use our time better. So that might be less time in meetings, less time per meeting, or it might be getting better outcomes from the meeting, and that's simple. That's not complicated. Simple isn't always easy. So the idea of a marathon is not complicated. It's get from point A to point B. Yep. Doing it is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a little bit like that with getting our meetings right. A lot of it starts with just getting the fundamentals that we know right, and having a way that we can work with our team and others in our organisation to do that. One thing I've seen is it's really hard for one person to go in and try and change the way that everyone meets.
That's usually me. I'm the one that says, I want to change the world, let's do this. Everyone's
yeah. So you go in, I've been that person. I go in and I sit in the room, because there was this culture that we all started late, and I just sit in the room and people walk past. And so, there's some teams where I'll go when everyone else goes, and you have this sort of standoff that the meeting started at 10 o'clock, but no one's in there yet. And because no one's going in there. And so I'll be the person that goes in and sits there. It's hard to do.
Okay.
Easier if you get some agreements and you start working with your team or with a larger group of people around, here's how we think that our meeting should run. And that's it. Sort of when I talk to people, I talk about the design element and making sure that they are designing meetings the way that they want to. So they've got some direction, they've got a purpose, they know who they've got to engage, and they know all of those things are happening, which is important. And then the second bit I talk about, well, you've sort of got to bring that to life, right? You've got to execute on that plan. You've got to deliver on what your plan is, and sort of got to be prepared. You've got to be facilitating in the session and making sure of that. And another thing I talk about is confirming in the meeting around that. We've got a tendency to obsess around minutes and all those sorts of things. And for some meetings, it's important to keep minutes, and probably more important is actually, do we all agree on stuff? Do we know who's going to take actions from here, so that
It's
there's
the action.
meetings are doing something, and so the meetings are feeling productive and moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then that last point around how do you make this happen, and how do you make it not feel like you're the one, person swimming against the tide, and engaging other people. So you got to sort of, build a culture within your team and with your organisation where better meetings are more likely to happen. Yeah. And I'll talk about sort of 3 phases in that as well.
Yeah. And it is a real cultural shift, isn't it? The way teams have meetings in organisations, and you really get a sense of an organisation when you attend a meeting. I think especially as an external consultant, when I go into places, I just get a real sense of how everything runs there, and how happy people are and all of those things.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. I wrote a blog piece a while ago around Gogglebox for meetings. Can you imagine?
Okay. Can you imagine don't put me in there. I'll be.
If I was watching your meetings, what would they say? Like, what's that guy doing? It'd be so fascinating to see what other people would say, but having that mindset around, well, what would that be like? And so going and watching other people's meetings and seeing what that's like. And
I would love to do it. If anybody out there wants somebody to Gogglebox their meetings, my number is below.
It's fascinating. And it's one of those things that, again, I think part of this is actually drawing attention to it. And we slip into really easy default modes of operating, and it seems to be okay that our meetings are mediocre or worse. Just it happens over time. We don't do it deliberately. And part of having this conversation is to help people go, maybe we could do this a little bit better, and we're doing it the way that we want to. And often those are the conversations that really help.
Yeah. So if people watching would like to do something today to get started with changing meeting culture, because again, it's not, we're not saying this is a slap a Band-Aid on it and everything is going to be fine. But if they wanted to do something to start conversations with people about how they change their meeting culture, or thinking about what they can do to change a meeting culture, what would be your key takeaways?
A few things. I'd certainly jump on that Harvard calculator and have a sense of what the hard cost is. And so
business loves a number.
And it's really nice to be able to talk that, again, because in learning, some of our stuff there's long lag time, there's sort of indirect connection between what we do and the business outcome.
Bottom line,
Stuff is really easy, so it's nice to have that one up your sleeve.
Yes.
For those conversations in the conversations you're having with people in your team, in other teams, with the people that you're partnering with, listen for those conversations, and then offer to talk to them about that and see what they're doing. Maybe look at your calendar, look at their calendar, and see how much of your week or your month are you spending in meetings, and then run some numbers on that. And then I do this really simple exercise of, okay, well, what if it's here and it got to here? What would this mean in terms of you for dollars, for opportunity costs, for engagement?
Right.
And likewise, what if it got worse? What would that be? And have that, and that's again a template I can share with people around that. It's really super simple, but those conversations are so helpful, and then you can work through it. And we've also put together a really easy diagnostic for people to get a sense of, well, how do you think your meetings are going? And then what are some steps that you can take on the back of that as well?
Awesome. Well, we'll put links below the video to all those wonderful resources. We do love a resource in L&D, don't we? So if people are interested in seeing what you can do today to sort of help your business bottom line and just get those meetings working better, there's some free things that you can download there. And I'll pop your details, Keegan, your LinkedIn profile on your website underneath. That's okay if people want to contact you to have another chat. But thank you very much for talking to me. I love doing these because when I have these sort of random chats with people and then I go, oh my gosh, I think we need to be talking more about this, because it's stuff like meetings, it just goes under the radar and everybody just does them. And I think, it's probably one of those, it is a low hanging fruit item. We could really get in there and make a big difference that, could end up being a big cultural change, from just something that's so small.
Yeah, and I think, if you were the person that was shifting the way that meetings happened in your team or in your organisation, what a great legacy that would be. You'd be giving a lot of good time back into people's lives. So I think that'd be, and the commercial benefits as well. So
fabulous. All right. Well, look, legacy commercial benefits, kudos, trusted advisors, click below, get your freebies and get started with it. All right, thanks for your time, Keegan.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.